right, so today I'm going to be making a crate texture, I guess technically 4 crate textures, for a class that I teach. So I figured I'd stream it here first, and then I'll go ahead and save this out and launch it on my YouTube later. Alright, so here we have 2048 by 2048. You can see up here I've hit Control R to open up my rulers. So if you don't know how to use Photoshop, this is for a Photoshop class. I came over here and I drug in these 2 textures. I got these for free at textures.com. You can sign up with an email, and then you get 15 credits every day. So now I need to make sure that snap is on. It's on right here. And I'm going to come up into my move tool and drag out my midpoint like so. So this just blocks in my 2 midpoints, and then I'm going to be making basically the front of a wooden crate. Okay, so I don't have the example out right now that I normally show in class, but what I'm going to be doing is dragging out basically like 4 boards, a top board, a bottom board, a left and a right board, and a few slats in between to make a wooden crate. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and delineate the areas that I want these boards to be in with some additional guides. Now, one of the easy ways to do this, the easiest way, is to just drag it down until your heart's content. But if you're trying to be very accurate, then come into View and come down to New Guide. And then I've got 2 screens running so you guys don't see it, but it's right here. And I can pop in, let's say that I want one of these to be 150 pixels. Okay, so I can type in 150, leave it on vertical, say OK, and then it drops this in at 150 pixels. Now, because this is 2048 by 2048, these pop in at 1024. But what I can do, if I'm not good at math, I can allow my New Guide button to do the math for me. So I type in 1024 minus 150, right? And then bam, it's going to give me this New Guide 150, just like this one, but 150 inward from the center line. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing for my other 2 guides, right? If I'm going to switch it to horizontal, say 150, and then do another guide, 1024 minus 150. Okay, and there we go. Now, the way that I'm doing this texture, I only have to do this top left quadrant for the first round. Alright, and then I'll make duplicates, pull them off, and those the duplicates will become my variants, which I'll show. So I'm going to be moving through this pretty quick. In class I take my time, it might take about an hour, but I'm going to go through this as fast as I can, because I've got several videos I'm supposed to be making tonight. But you'll be able to watch this in slow motion, and because it's recorded, and see it over and over again. Okay, so over here on the right hand side you can see that I have these 2 textures I talked about before, and then right here you can see that they have a little icon in the bottom right hand corner. These make these smart objects. These smart objects can be scaled up and down infinitely without losing their overall resolution. All right, And we talked about those quite a bit in class. What I like to do in order to make sure that I work non-destructively is I will put these into a group, just name that smart, and then I'm going to start dragging a copy out of this. So I just alt-click and drag up like so. And welcome to the channel, or welcome to the stream, I should say. And then I'm just going to turn off that folder, right? So I grab the copied version. I'm going to hit Control-T. If you're on a Mac, it's Command-T, and that is to go into your transform. And I'm going to scale this down. If you hold Alt, it'll scale down from the middle. And then I'm going to scale this roughly down to the size that I need. Snap it in, and I'm going to find a good spot where I like the texture, you know, and maybe that's a good spot right there. So Z as in Z to zoom in, or Z for zoom. And then while I'm here, I think this looks pretty okay. So I'm going to go ahead and mask this. Okay, so I'm going to hit M for my marquee tool. You can see up here in the top left. And then I'm going to come over here. And like I said, if you can't follow along at this speed, that's fine. This is all recorded, so you can go back and do it in slow motion. So I've got my marquee made, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do a add layer mask. So on the bottom right, there's a layer mask button underneath of your layers. Okay, so that's made a mask and chopped out that bit of board, right? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hold my space bar and pull this down. Space bar gives you your hand. I'm going to hold Alt over this layer and drag up a copy. You can also do it here. I'm going to hold Shift, pull this guy up. I don't really care if I get it exact, because I'm going to be making duplicates of this anyway. And then what I can do if I'm trying to save time is just drag out 2 more copies anyway, because I know I still need the left and the right. So I'm going to come into this one right here. I'm going to delete this mask. All right, and then hit M, and I'm going to remask this area exactly, and then hit mask. Okay, now this little guy, I don't particularly like having this overhang, right, like this color change. So what I'm going to do is try to get a different area. Also, this little check mark is going to show that this is the same board pretty easily. So over here, there's a chain in between the mask and the preview. So I click that chain, that unlinks the mask, and this is going to allow me to hit Control-T, and then I'm going to right-click, say flip horizontal, and flip vertical. And then because that gives me this weird exposed edge that I don't like, I'm just going to drag that guy up. I'm just using my up keys right now, and that'll give me what I'm looking for right there. All right. Nice. Hit enter, and that one is golden. I'm going to do that 2 more times. So I'm going to grab this one, Control-T, hold Shift, rotate, and we'll drag this one over. That one is actually really close to being right where it needs to be. Is interesting. And then we'll do this top one. Control-T, hold Shift, rotate 90 degrees, and then snap that one as close as you can. Make sure the bounding box is over the entire thing. Notice my bounding box is bigger than the area that I need, which is good for this type of work. So I'm going to grab that, I'm going to delete that guy and this guy. So there's two masks. Then hit M, marquee. And this marquee selection thing works best when you have snap turned on, because it uses the guides that I've already set up perfectly. It snaps right into it, pixel perfect. Okay, so come to that guy, mask that one, beautiful. Now these two sides, actually I'm going to put those below, and notice that layer order matters, right? So it allowed these right here, control semicolon, turn off your guides. It allowed the top and the bottom to sit over top of the pixels of the left and right side. Alright, so now I'm going to fix, oops, I'm going to fix these guys right here, unlink, unlink, control T. I'm just going to scooch this guy over a little bit. There we go, that looks good, enter. And then do the same thing here, select the preview, control T. I'm going to scoot this one over pretty far. And I'm going to actually flip this guy. Let's do a flip vertical. No, that puts that scuff mark same spot. Let's go back to flip vertical. There we go. That actually looks fairly natural, where the scuff came down, maybe missed, and then scuffed this up again. But you don't want a whole lot of this stuff to be super obvious. You know, normally you would grab a couple different boards. I'm just using one for the sake of speed. Alright, so that gets my tops and sides and everything else. I'm going to name these so that I know what they are for when I'm searching through this later. If I ever came back to this file. And this is how you should be setting up your files. I'm going to turn this back on. Control semicolon or command semicolon if you're on Mac. Now, I'm going to grab one of these side pieces. I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to call this mid. Alright, and then I'm going to set up a few additional, these ones I can just drag out and be kind of random with it. You know, maybe I want a center board, something like this. I'm going to try and keep them somewhat even-ish, but not 100%. It doesn't matter. You know, this is going to be kind of a rustic looking thing. In reality, the less variation you put in here usually is the best, because it's not going to show as easily. So like this one skinny board would start to show up pretty easily over, you know, 5 or 10 boxes, 5 or 10 crates. So normally you would take something like that out, and then you would take guys like this. You would try to find pretty normal or normalized divisions here. You know, something like this. Right? That's not too bad. You can play with that, fiddle with it at a later time. Alright, so V, oh, it matters. You're right. It matters so much that I actually regret saying how much that matters. So, let me grab that. I'm going to pull this guy out. Oh, whoops. I gotta turn that chain back on. So I'm going to drag this out like so. I'm going to get rid of this mask. Bum, bum, bum. There we go. I'm going to find a good place to put this. maybe like right there. And then because I can, I'm going to go ahead and mask out a couple boards out of this one dude here. Okay, and you'll notice that I'm actually grabbing a little bit bigger area than what I need because I want that overlap to keep from there being any sort of white pixel, like a single pixel that isn't covered. You see it a lot in old games or cheap games. So then, same thing. I'm going to mask that. I'm drag out another copy. Bing. I'm just going to delete that guy. Hit V. Move this dude over. Let's put this guy like maybe right here. I'm going to do a Control T. Let's flip it vertical. There we go. Hit Enter. M. Let's go ahead and mask out these guys. Bum, bum, bum. And then grab this one. Notice I've got the plus sign on my marquee icon. That's because up here I have myself set up as an add select. That's just how I use marquees and selection tools, pretty much as a rule. Keeps me from having to hold Shift or Alt all the time. Mask that out and make a couple more. I can probably do this with might as well just make 2 more. Delete that one, and we'll delete that mask. Okay. Let's go ahead and get this guy. We'll just do a single board here. Mask that one. And then this guy. Here's what we'll do. We'll scooch this guy over. I'm going to do a Control T just to get this done quick. I'm holding Alt to scale this out. I'm sorry, Shift to scale that out non-uniformly. So I can just squash down this texture a little differently so the wood doesn't feel exactly the same. Alright. So we'll go with that. And I think it's these two. This one, hold Shift if I wanted to, if you don't have it turned on, the add select, and then we'll go ahead and do another one there. Alright, I'm going to turn off my guides real fast, check things. That looks okay, generally speaking. I am going to flip this because you get this double check right there. Let's do a flip horizontal, and let's try a flip vertical. Let's see what happens with that. That's not great right there. Let's flip it back horizontal. Yeah. Let me pull this down. That hides it a little bit better. Okay, next we need to start adding in a little bit. There's a few things we could do. We could add in some cracks to show basically where all these guides are and the edges of these boards. or we could add the drop shadow in the center. It doesn't particularly matter what order we do that in. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the cracks real fast. This will be simple. I'm going to grab all of my boards, put those into another folder, call those boards, create a new layer, call these cracks, grab a brush tool, B. I'm going to scale this down to like maybe at this size, maybe 2 pixels, and maybe 3. Right click. Alright, and then you can choose what type of brush. I'm just using my mouse right now, so it's not going to show pressure sensitivity on any of these. But I'm going to use something that's a little crunchier because I think it gives a nicer look. So I've got all these custom brushes. If you don't have custom brushes, that's fine. These general brushes will work just fine. Alright, so I think I'm going to grab this guy, this paintbrush. And again, this is supposed to be, I think I said I wanted 3, maybe I'll do like 5 for this guy. We'll see what this looks like. And we're going to zoom in here. I'm going to grab a dark color, so hold Alt or B and hold Alt. I'm going to try and find a pretty dark color in here. Not black, but dark enough. That'll probably work. To keep myself from going out of bounds, I'm going to make a bigger selection right there. Go back into B. I'm still on snap. As you can see right here, it's still checked, which is good because that's going to allow me to easily snap as I draw across this line right here for the crack. Alright, so I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to left click, hold shift. I'm going to zip across that a couple times, like so. Do the same thing down here. I'm going to left click, and then left click and hold shift. Zip across here a few times. Beautiful. And then I'm going to come up here, right at this intersection. I'm going to pull down just to the edge of this inner box. Right, and do that a couple times, just up and down with my mouse. And I know if you're watching this on a low res, you might not be able to see because the icon is pretty small. But trust me, there's an icon painting there. Alright, so let me hit. Now you can see that I've got these lines drawn. Right, I'm going to turn my guides back on. I'm going to paint in the breaks for each of these boards. So I come in here. Shift, hold shift and left click and drag down. Do that just up and down, up and down. I'm going to come over here, click, click again, hold shift, drag up and down and up and down. And then click, click again, hold shift. The reason I'm doing click, click again is because if I'm holding shift and I just click over here, it draws a line across from one shift click to the next shift click, which is not what I want. So I'm going to left click again, pull down, pull up, do this a few times. And you can do this to where you get as accurate as you want. I'm doing a faster rendition right now, just because this is for class, to teach out the principles, not necessarily to make the world's nicest texture, if you get what I'm saying. Okay, control, there we go. So now you can see that I've got some boards drawn in, but you might look at this and you say, well, that kind of looks like garbage. That's not dark enough color, and you're right. So I use a blending mode over here, but it is the right hue and temperature, right? So if I come over here and I change my blending mode, look at this. If I do a linear burn, it goes immediately black. If I do a color burn, you know, that gets pretty dark. If I do a multiply, that gets darker, but not crazy, right? Just darken, that does a little bit. And you can use things like your overlays. There's a lot of options here. I'm going to stick with maybe like this color burn. Looks pretty good. And then if that looks too dark, you can always change your opacity, right? Do something like this, perhaps. I'm going to leave it just a little darker. Something like that will be fine, I think. What you could do if you really wanted to is you could make two of these. One that's, you know, maybe a lower opacity, and maybe it's like this multiply, something like that, so you get these rims. And then you could do a cracks number 2 with a smaller brush, like this is a 5. You go down to like a 2, something like that, with maybe a harsher or a harder brush. And then do the same thing again. You come in here, hold shift, zip across a few times. And that's probably the wrong brush for that. Let me grab this guy, just a hard round at 2. There we go. That's pretty clearly drawing something. And you'll see what this does here in a second. I'm going to come right here, draw another line. I'm just doing the same thing over again, but you're going to see what this is going to do. It's going to give me like 2 versions of the same texture. One thin, one thick. So that when I change this layer to that color burn, you see how now I get that real nice cut, real good dark cut there, and then there's like this little bit of a hazier bleed over, you know. So I go from that to this. It's not too bad. Alright, so that's something that you could do if you felt like playing with this more. I'm going to do these guys just real quick just to do it. Get that guy. It won't take too long, that's the thing. You know, once you get the feel for what you're doing here, the stuff flies by. There we go. Turn my guides off. See, look how nice that looks. That looks pretty crisp, right? Now we got to push this intersection in. So this is a little bit of a trick. I'm gonna call this cracks 2. C-R-A-C-K-S. Cracks 2. There we go. And now I'm going to make a shadow for this inner bit, right? So what this is going to be a little trick. I create this guy. I'm going to call this inner shadow or mid shadow. Okay. And then I'm going to grab my marquee tool. Let me turn my guides back on. Marquee tool M. Grab this dude. I make a marquee selection of this entire inner chunk, this little box. And I'm going to grab my G tool and make sure it's on bucket, paint bucket, and dump any color in here. I mean, it can be literally anything. I could drop pure black or pure white, doesn't matter. It just has to go into, well, that didn't work because I had my marquee selection. Control D to exit out of that. There you go. Make sure you only have this selected. So grab that, make yourself a little bucket dump. And what I'm going to do is do a inner glow. Double click my layer. That is going to give me layer styles over on my other screen here. Layer style. Now this is kind of like a little trick, right? Inner shadow works okay, and we can add additional inner shadows. You can also should be able to use inner glow as well. I'll show you both of these. If I use inner shadow, turn this guy on and click on it. Let me go ahead and select 135 like so. Whoopsie. There we go. And I'm going to select on this. I've got kind of like a purplish, dark purplish hue right now. You can see it's a dark inner purple shadow. Maybe I grab something like that. That'd be nice. And then what I need to do is create something like this guy, right? So get myself a little inner shadow. And then let's play with the size just a touch. All right. I don't really care about the choke so much. That's just like where it starts to blend off at. I'm going to play with that size just a little bit more to push this in. The distance and size. All right. And then I'm going to use my opacity. Crank that up just a wee bit. I'm going to say OK. But I'm going to add, well, I'm not going to click OK because that'll close it. But I'm going to add one more. So I'm going to click this button, and then I'm going to come into the second guy, and then I'm going to change, because what it does is it makes a copy. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to turn off use global light. If I leave this on, if I change this, it's just going to move it for both of them. So I'm going to turn global light off. I'm going to turn this down to a -45, which is the exact opposite of the 135. And all the rest of the calculations would stay the same, right? So then I've got this guy and that guy. Now you'll notice it almost looks like this one's darker, at least up here. Now the other problem is you get this little thing where this corner and this corner overlap each other. So that's kind of odd. You know, it's not something I particularly like. But you can use these if you drag the distance back a little bit, make these smaller. Maybe these are more for like the near contact shadow. So I drag that back a little bit. Let's pull this size in just a little bit. You know, something along these lines. Remember those calculations for the other one? It was like 7 and 10. We want it to be pretty consistent. Now I come to this inner glow. Watch what this inner glow does. This inner glow, I'm going to cheat it. Normally it wants to actually be a glow, but I'm going to change this to a multiply or a color burn. I'm going to change this over to a pretty dark color. Again, maybe one of these darker bluey purple kind of colors. And then we're going to crank this opacity up so we can really see it. And then check up or crank up our, do a precise. Let's see. There we go, multiply. You can add a little noise to it if you want. For some reason, it just wasn't showing real good. You can play with this choke. Now what this choke does is it basically does the same job as these inner shadows. So I'm going to leave the choke off on this guy. And I really don't like that noise all that much either. It's not terrible, but I don't like it that much. Alright, and you can see that this plus this gives us already that harder edge there. You can play with things like jitter. I don't really worry about that so much. Go from the center or the edge. We're going to do from the edge. I'm actually going to leave this on softer now that it's behaving itself. There for a second it just wasn't calculating for some reason, so but now it is. So there you go. Alright, so we've got that guy. Again, you can turn it off and on here to see what that looks like. It looks good. I'll say okay. Let me turn these guides off so we can see what's really going on. Now, this layer is still a normal layer, but I'm going to turn, instead of opacity will turn off everything. I'm going to use the fill layer right here and turn my fill off completely. I'm going to hit Control D to get rid of that selection, and you can see that now these boards are starting to look inset a bit, right? Well, watch what happens if I change my blending mode to something that cranks this up a little bit more too. So we should be able to crank this guy up and see some more effects, or go into your effects here. Now that all that other stuff is turned off, click on your inner glow. Instead of being an opacity of 52, maybe we crank this guy up a little bit. You know, not too much, not too much. Increase the size just a little bit, which pushes this middle section back in space, right? So maybe we do like 50 pixels, right? You see how that really shoved that center of the box back in space? And we obviously are not actually shoving it anywhere, but it's the illusion. We're also not wanting to, I'm going to say okay. We also don't want to give any information that says that light comes from one direction or another, because in a video game, if you bake the lights into this texture right out of the gate, then your shadows are almost guaranteed to be wrong, right? Because you don't know what the orientation of the crate is going to be to the orientation of the lights in the scene. So this will get you there pretty well. Like, this is generally finished. If you wanted to, you could come in, you could put straps or the end of nails or whatever. You can Photoshop all that in the same way we Photoshopped these guys in. But this will serve as a good first texture. Alright, and you zoom back, that looks pretty real for 38 minutes while I'm teaching. Now, if I take this guy, I hit Marquee Select, M, I'm going to grab all these, and I'm going to hit, let me put all these guys into one folder. There you go. I'm just going to call that 1. Then I'm going to do a copy all visible, Control Shift C, Control Shift C. If you're on a Mac, Command Shift C. There you go. And then Control V. There you go. So now you can see layer 1. I'm going to hit V and just drag this over. I'm going to hold Shift while I'm doing so, and it will snap. And hold Alt and Shift and drag this down. I'm just going to pull it over, just because I like for my 3 to be on the left. There you go. And then hold Alt and then hit Shift as you're dragging to snap this guy in. Beautiful. Now you've got a few alternate versions, right? So what you're going to do from here is you're going to take some textures and you're going to drop them in over top of your new alternate side, right? So, and I'll do this for this one. I'll put a little grunge texture, and maybe this guy will do some text, and you guys can figure out what you want to do for the others. All right. So let me just turn this on so I can get a really good map again once I do a marquee. So I'm going to come down to the smart layer. I'm going to find this guy, this little grunge that I dropped in here. I'm going to do hold Alt, drag up a copy over top of 1. Right, now we can see this nasty grunge. Turn that smart layer off and hide those again. Control T. Grab this. I'm going to do a right click, flip vertical. There you go. So we'll drag this up right about there. That looks good. Hit enter. And then what you do is you mask this out. M. Marquee select. Inside of that box. Add your mask. Boom. I can turn off these guys for now. And because this is already a PNG, there's not a whole lot that I have to do from here. But I could come in, break this mask if I wanted these taller. Hold shift, drag this up a little bit. I don't want to get too ridiculous, but I want to bring this up just a touch, like so. And if I wanted, I could do the same thing on top, you know, but maybe to a lesser degree. So maybe I'd do something like this where I relink this, drag a copy, Control T. I'm just going to flip this whole thing, right click, flip vertical, and then hold shift and drag it up. There we go. Enter. I'm going to hit V and just bump that up a few pixels just to make sure. Alright. And then to make sure that this side and this side aren't the same, actually I'm going to do a Control T. 1 second. Break that chain. Then Control T. No. Flip horizontal as well. So this side's over there. It doesn't. I don't want it matching up exactly. And I'll pull this guy out a little bit more, just so, like I said, it's not a 1-for-1. It's not as easy to recognize that it's the exact same texture. Then I'm just going to relink that, grab this guy, and we're going to make him, maybe this one we make an overlay layer, so it just looks kind of stained up. And maybe we drop the opacity down just a touch so it blends in a little bit better. That looks nice. And then we'll grab the first one we did. Maybe that one is a little harsher. Hard light doesn't look terrible. Vivid light, that's kind of gross. Some of these get really nasty. This actually is kind of nice, this difference. Yeah. Subtract's not too bad either. I might try the subtract, and I play with the opacity just a little bit. Make it look like that wood's kind of rotted. You've been sitting in the water. This up here is just something spilled on it, but this down here makes it look a little bit more like rot. Alright, so you could continue with this box. I'm going to come down to a different one and show another technique just with some text, so you can make your own decals, and this works for pretty much anything. So what I'm going to do is come up above, so we'll call this guy 2, we'll call this one 3, and this one we'll call, actually that one's 4, so this is 2, that one's 3, that one's 4, there we go. So we'll come above this guy. I'm going to hit my new layer right there. We'll call this arrow. There we go. Hit L for lasso. I want my polygonal lasso, so I just hold left click on that, and I'm going to come down here and do a quick arrow. Alright, something like that. Hit G. Go to my bucket tool. Maybe I'll use white on this. There we go. Control D to get out of that. So now I've got kind of a generic arrow here. I'm going to hit T and type in some text. I'm going to say this side up. There we go. I'm going to change that text also to white. I'm going to change my font to something that feels a little more decal-y. That's a technical term, decal-y. You have to say it like that. You can't say decal-y. It's going to be decal-y. So stencil. There we go. Ooh, look at that. Now it's all like kind of military-ish. And then maybe we crank up the size of this just a wee bit bigger. There we go. We'll scooch that on over. If we want these two things to line up, I select both layers, and up here at the top, I align. And maybe I want this to be just a little taller. There we go. That's now a thing. I'm going to grab both of these, hit Control E or Command E if you're on Mac, and that's going to merge the two layers that I had. It's already called this side up, so that works out fine. And it also rasterizes the text. So now in my Move tool, I can move this thing to wherever I want. Maybe the person that put the decal on wasn't particularly paying attention, so I can crank it up like this, you know, just shove it up here in the corner, hit Enter, and there we go. Now that thing is there. Now, to get all the cracks in here, I'm going to go back into my layer styles. I do that layer styles by double clicking the layer over here. Opens this guy up, and now we're going to use the blend if range right here. So you have blend if based on the color of the icon. Now I have white, so I'm not going to really use that because also I want this icon to be affected by the wood cracks underneath, which are darker, and the wood grain, the cracks in the wood grain are darker, and the splits between the wood boards that I painted are darker. So that is underlying layer. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is start to pull this in, and you can see as I yank this arrow to the right, it breaks up that image and shows the cracks, right? That's pretty cool. I can do the same thing here. If I want some of those high spots to show, then, you know, where things have been rubbing on the higher areas, I can do something like this. And I usually tend to bring things to a point that are beyond what I want, and then I'll hold Alt and I'll click this arrow, which will break it apart, and I'll pull back and click this holding Alt, and I'll pull back, and this eases that in, right? Gives a gradient selection. And then I'll adjust these guys in just a little bit more, typically. And this gives me a really nice faded look. I'll say OK. And the beautiful thing about this is if your boss comes along later, or your client comes along and they wish that it was over here, I can just drag it over like so, wherever I want, and it will pop it on. Like even this, you know, somebody couldn't even be bothered to stick the decal down properly, you know. So yeah, you're blending based on those underlying layers, so it doesn't matter where you move that to after the fact. It's a fantastic tool, fantastic, and the realism you can get off of this if you have a good bit of texture underneath is, well, pretty high, pretty good. So that in a nutshell is the assignment. You'll do your primary texture on one side, and then you'll do 3 variations of that primary texture. Top right, bottom left, bottom right, and you'll do whatever you want down here. You know, you could literally do anything that you wanted. You could come in and spray paint some stuff. You can add nuts and bolts and hinges or whatever. The kicker is that you try to keep them looking similar-ish, right? You know, you want it to feel like it's still generally in the same family. So I could even come in here and let me grab a real grungy looking guy like this randomizer that I've got. This is a great brush. And then I'll just do this real fast so you can see the process one last time. I'm making my marquee around this quarter so that I can't paint outside of this. It just makes my life a little easier. And then maybe I grab some black or some dark brown, which would be better actually. Something like this real grungy, gross stuff here. So I could grab something like this, and maybe I just paint this in here, right? And then maybe I grab, like, let's do a few more clicks. All right, I'm gonna get real nasty with it. Okay, we'll take that guy, we'll do an overlay, maybe a difference. That's not terrible actually. What's it look like if we do that subtract? That's what we used last time. That's not bad. Yeah, that subtract actually works out pretty nice. And then maybe we do the opposite of that. You know, let's do a white over top. I'm just gonna paint this. Oh, that gets dirty. Yeah, that's gross. I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna do another layer. And I'm gonna do let's knock my flow down to like 50%. Something like this. And then let's play with blending modes again. So I do something like an overlay. That's too much soft light, too much hard light. Yeah, I mean, the problem with these guys is I'm not using a good color that matches that wood. I'm using white, right? So what you would want to do, let me delete layer 2. Let me show you again. So I'm going to pick, hold Alt, and pick a good color that matches what you're shooting for here. So if I want something to feel kind of grungy and like it's maybe part of this box, do something like this. Then I should be able to come in because it's got a little bit more color. And there. Yeah, look at that. See how that matches? It warms that top up. That soft light looks really natural. That overlay looks pretty good. You can change that a little bit, knock that down. Maybe you come back in to that again, make a second layer for the top. You come into your hues. I'm going to add just a little bit of darkness to this and a little bit of, ooh, I know what I'm going to do. Let's use a splatter brush. I'm going to splatter some stuff on these edges. Not too crazy, but just a little. Right? And I would use my Wacom tablet if I was doing this professionally, but this is just a class. You guys will get the feel. You'll understand what I'm doing, and you'll hopefully be able to mimic this with relative ease. So then you can come through again and play around with your blending modes and just find something that looks good. You know, a lot of these kind of look like garbage, but these color burns, sometimes these color burns can be really cool once you back the opacity down. You know, like look at that. Once you back that down, now it looks like people spilled something or got some, I don't know, mold or mildew on there. You know, and you could keep hitting this if you wanted to. You know, just little bits here and there. You could change your color, you know, while you're at it. So maybe if you wanted to do something that was more in the red category and bring it down kind of dark, and you could still ding over top of this. You could switch to a different brush use some sort of texture thing, you know, bring the opacity of that texture thing down pretty low. You know, maybe you wanted some sort of brush stroke coming right down the side. You know, I mean, that doesn't look particularly good by any means, but what I'm showing you is that these things work, you know. You can draw or paint pretty much anything on these and get the job done. Go with an Overwatch brush. This is a fun one. You can pop a little Overwatch pattern in here. I think I got this pattern actually from an Overwatch dev, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty cool. But yeah, just a fun way to come in and add flavor to this. Maybe we do one more thing just because we're here. Let's do a caution or warning or toxic. Ooh, toxic. And we'll do like an exclamation mark, and we'll start with an exclamation mark. Toxic. There we go. Let's do, oops, XXX. And we'll do one above that as well. XXX, enter. All right, and then we'll change this whole thing to a centered. Oh, do the whole thing. There we go. That's what I'm shooting for. We'll make this maybe also white. I'll do red. I feel like that's a warning that should probably be red. And we'll go ahead and make this bigger. We'll sit it like right down in here. There we go. I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to do rasterize type. I'm going to change my blending mode. You could have it look like it's embedded in there with like an overlay or a soft light. That's interesting. Sometimes I like to just go through them and see what each of them is going to look like before I commit. That linear burn doesn't look too bad. Pull that back just a wee bit. And then I'm going to adjust this for those cracks again. Pull this way in. This is going to be like super toxic. Some old school paint. Hold Alt, split those. Hold Alt, split that. Pull this middle in tighter so that you can get some pretty heavy erosion that's gradated off real nice. This helps your faded edges from being too crunchy. And then when you zoom in, you know, you get some, you'll never be viewing it this close, but you get some nicer, crunchier looks, right? All right. Well, I hope that this helps when you are done with your assignment, go ahead and save it as a PSD as well as a JPEG. Send me one giant JPEG with all 4 of these textures, a 2048 by 2048, and your PSD as well, your Photoshop file. All right, hope that helped, and I'll talk at you later.